right. You did it right. You waited, you married, you followed the rules. So why does sex still feel dirty? In this episode, we're going to rip out that lie at the root and light it on fire. I'm Kim Snyder, and this is Faith Unfiltered. Purity culture. It's what religion leaves us with. That long list of things you're not supposed to do so that you can set yourself aside for that future spouse. One of the best kept secrets in, quote, Christian marriage is finding that after you get married, there's a whole bunch of issues that you didn't know came along with that whole religious wrapping of saving yourself for marriage. The irony is that God does ask us to wait for marriage, but after that, he tells us something completely different that I don't think religion in general is doing a very good job of communicating. So if you've had a little trouble in the bedroom as a believer, this episode is for you. I got married the first time when I was 19 to a not so good guy who made me feel like a prude for not having slept around a lot. I never saw myself getting married that young, but I ended up getting married because of the church. Nobody told me to, but I was a young Christian woman in a really difficult situation without a place to live. There was a young man who offered me a place to live, and I didn't want to shack up with him because I knew that wouldn't make God happy. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I went and asked opinions from good, godly people, believing, honestly, that they would help me find a place to stay. This was when I learned a really hard lesson. There are really good people out there that will give you some pretty awful advice, including some pastors. Looking back, I see where the problem was. If I had just gone to God, spent some time in the Bible, and told him, look, I'm in a desperate situation. I need a place to live, and I don't want to be in this situation, I have every confidence that God would have provided a way out of that situation for me. But I didn't. I took the shortcut. I just went to people. I just trusted they were plugged into God, and they were giving me what God really wanted to say anyway. But they weren't. And in the end, I ended up marrying the guy just to have a place to live and not feel guilty before God. It turned into 5 years of trying to escape an incredibly abusive relationship. So after that divorce, I was committed to never getting married ever again. Then a couple of years later, God told me, yeah, that wasn't my plan. The second time around, God gave me an incredible, God-loving, God-fearing man who adored me. I had grown up in a Christian household and gave my life to Christ when I was 15, but he didn't do that until adulthood. Both of us had set ourselves apart, waiting for the person God would bring us. So I fully expected the sex to be incredible. And I was not at all prepared for some of the issues that, honestly, women really have never talked about publicly until probably the last several years. After both of us had been celibate for so long, sex still felt off limits. Chalk that up to the giant list of things no one ever told me about. We are now 30 years into the most incredibly happy marriage I never really believed existed. And I'm going to tell you how we negotiated that problem at the end of this episode. Really, it's just been in the last number of years that people have started talking somewhat openly under secret aliases online about the things that have been happening in the bedroom for many years. Like the number one question people who saved themselves in marriage are now asking, why do I feel ashamed of sex now that I'm finally married? You know, when I got married the second time, somebody told me that you're considered a newlywed for 5 years. I thought that was a little ridiculous. I thought we dated for a long time. We knew each other really well. What more is there to possibly learn? Well, now having been married for more than 5 years, I can say that they were right. It takes a long time to really know somebody and live with them as their counterpart. It took my, by all accounts, perfect husband a few years to understand I would like to know if and when he was coming home. It just took a long time for his brain to make that change from totally independent to part of a team. And I had issues of my own. And if it takes several years to really settle in and become a team that works together in unison, why do we think that really good sex would be any different? Our culture will tell us that really good sex is just a physical thing. But in marriage, the way it was designed by God, who put the parts on the people to work the way they do, Sex was designed to be something so much more. And his intent for that level of intimacy in marriage is far beyond just a physical thing. When we were engaged, we spent time going to Christian conferences for newlyweds and married couples and gonna-be married couples, trying to get ahead of all the problems that we might have so that we could have a truly great godly marriage. We put the time in, and never once did I hear this discussed. When you spend so much of your time trying so hard not to think about sex, it takes time for your brain to realize that gate is open and you're allowed to walk through it. And honestly, it takes even longer to move from that point to embracing all that God has for you in his plan for marital sex. Sure, a lot of people that didn't save themselves for marriage have great sex. According to them, our culture tells us to embrace your dirty mind, and that's what will free you to have great sex. But not only does that cause a serious moral conflict, it rarely ever helps any more than temporarily, because the world's view of what great sex is not at all in line with what God's view of great sex is. When I was a kid, there were 2 books of the Bible we were not allowed to read. One was Revelation, and the other one, yeah, if you know anything about the Bible, it's the Song of Solomon, or sometimes called the Song of Songs. It's the sex book in the Bible, which as a teenager, I read because I wasn't supposed to. In order for a book to be included in the final Bible, it had to be a book that it could be proved was inspired by God. It had to have integrity and consistency with every other author across 1,600 years of biblical content. So how did the sex book make it into the Bible? When God created man and then created a woman from part of his body, it was meant to be a picture of how God wants to be united with us, to be one family. And when you read the entire Bible, it's really clear that God gave us the picture of marriage and the institution of marriage to give us the deepest insight we could have to the relationship he not only wants to have with us, but will have with us. The Song of Songs was written by King Solomon and was highly prized within Jewish synagogues, mostly for its picture of God's love for his people. Christ gave his life so that we could be united to God again. Before that, if we wanted to know God, those of us who were not Jewish would be relegated to the nosebleed section. And if we tried to get any closer, you literally would be killed. But when Jesus came and gave his life as the perfect sacrifice, he literally tore the veil in the temple. That meant you didn't have to go through layers and layers to get closer to God. You didn't have to go through a priest, and you didn't have to give a confession. Because of what Christ did, we went from being strangers with God to having the opportunity to being completely united with him. And marriage is that picture. It's also the most beautiful picture of the future he has for us, because the Bible calls Christ the groom and the church, those who believe in Christ, the bride. And when the rapture comes, it's the groom coming to get the bride, whisking her away for the marriage ceremony and taking her to the perfect fairy tale ending. But that's no fairy tale. That's actually going to happen. In the meantime, marriage is meant to mirror that. While my husband and I deeply loved each other before we got married, we were still individuals and in many ways still strangers to each other. Even though we were instantaneously married and viewed as one by the law, it took a while for us to learn to function as one united team. And honestly, if I'd had the advice I'm going to give you in this episode, I think it would have happened years sooner. In Song of Solomon 7:10, the woman says, "I am my beloved's, his desire is for me." That's every woman's dream, right? I was so excited for my wedding night. But we had a really long drive and we were tired and there was no magic. It turns out we all carry a lot of baggage, no matter our age or our past. We live in a culture that tells us to be ashamed of our bodies, to constantly compare ourselves to other people, and to constantly compare our spouse to other people too. It's the opposite of what the Bible tells us to do. Proverbs 5:19 tells a husband to be exhilarated with his wife's love. Doesn't say you will be exhilarated. It says be exhilarated. That, my friends, is a choice. It's a choice not to compare. It's a choice not to go down the road of shame. It's the choice not to stand too long in front of the mirror, if you know what I mean. Why do we feel ashamed of sex once we get married? I think it's because most of us don't realize that the shift that should take place takes time, and it will be helped by communication. But where one or both people feel a little awkward or let down, the first thing we do is clam up. The first thing we have to do is to understand what marriage was meant to be. Throughout the entire Bible, God uses marriage as his way of communicating the intimacy between us and God. It's a courtship. God seeks us out. And when we choose him, he makes a permanent, forever covenant with us. And from that moment, God is perfect, but on our end, not so much. It takes time for us to know God, to trust him, to grow in a depth of relationship where we just automatically rely on him and we just freely give everything over to him. It's a process. And if that is true, why do we think that the second we sign that marriage certificate, everything should be perfectly in place in a marriage? The newlywed phase is the stage in which we're supposed to learn how to become one. True intimacy and our sex life is a good barometer of how emotionally intimate we are as a couple, because intimacy is nakedness. To be emotionally naked means to choose to be vulnerable. Think about Adam and Eve. From the instant they were created, they were a married couple by God. They were both naked, and neither one was ashamed. They were completely vulnerable with each other because there was no chance that anyone was going to take advantage of the other person. The concept of nakedness, to the Hebrew, the Jews, meant openness and vulnerability in a loving relationship without the fear of being hurt. And if you've been hurt before, and who hasn't, you have the fear of being hurt. And that's really what's at the core of our insecurities, physical or otherwise. After sin entered the world, Adam and Eve started grabbing every fig leaf they could find because all of a sudden their vulnerability was exposed and their trust in each other had been broken. From that moment on, every human relationship, including marriage, has struggled with body shame and fear and wanting to distance ourselves from each other in a protective stance. And God was not surprised. He saw this coming before it happened. But he intended marriage to be the place where vulnerability can be restored, that through our dependence on him and our communication with each other, our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, and our attitudes can fully be shared in trust with our spouse. And when that happens, everything in the bedroom gets considerably better. In history and in a lot of different cultures, arranged marriages were a good thing. And in some cultures today, it's still done. But did you know it was God's idea that you get to pick your own spouse? God designed marriage in a way that we would be able to experience the incredible feeling of being chosen by somebody and loved by them. It was the picture of God choosing us. And when we take the time to talk about intimacy and openness and choosing to trust each other when no harm has been done and trust should not be broken, and living out our relationship inside and outside the bedroom, that way we are saying, I choose you. I choose you again. I choose you again. I choose you again. And that strengthens everything in a relationship. So you may not like how your body looks compared to other things you've seen. Guess what? Back in the olden days, when you didn't get to see everybody else's body, you felt pretty good about yourself. This is just the world we live in. But especially when it comes to your marriage, the main thing you have to do when one or more partner has an issue is to say, does this benefit our marriage to believe? There are so many fears we have based on things that have happened to us in the past, things that we've seen happen to other people, just all the stuff we're aware of that we didn't really used to know about before. And when it comes to a really good marriage, the best thing we have to do is to say, is this fear something that is benefiting my view of myself, my view of my spouse, and our relationship? If the answer is no, we have to actively and continually make the choice to stop believing it. I know, it sounds simple, but it's like saying, don't look through the hole in the fence. As soon as you say, don't do something, It's what everybody wants to do, right? So don't think about how you don't like how your body looks. Don't compare your spouse to that other person. You can't just stop there. First John 4:18 says, the thing that casts out fear, those doubts, those things that are making you uneasy and embarrassed and awkward and keeping that open communication from happening, there's a solution for that. It's called perfect love. What is perfect love? It's choosing to trust when you've not been harmed. It's choosing to be intimate emotionally. It's choosing to have faith in your marriage and in your spouse. Even if you don't see the change right away, because guess what? Change takes time. So whether you have an issue where sex is just awkward, you're both a little uncomfortable because you avoided it for so long, a lot of times one partner is a little bit more adventurous than the other one. And sometimes the one that's a little uncomfortable about that can start making some harsh judgments. And that puts walls up and that breaks intimacy. And then pretty soon everybody's wondering, can this marriage last? When the answer is yes, it can. And here's how to do that. First, don't let your first move be to go to people and ask opinions, even if they're well-meaning and even if they're godly. Your first move has to be to go to God, the author and creator of marriage. There is no one who knows you or your spouse or your marriage and your situation like God does. And there's nobody who understands what his design is for your marriage but him. It's not to say you can't get feedback from other people, but that feedback should always be balanced against what God says in his word. And a great thing to do when you're struggling through marital issues is to read through the Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs. Whatever fear or doubt that you're trying to stop doing, replace them with any of the actions in this book. Song of Songs 4:7. You are altogether beautiful. There is no flaw in you. Try saying that to yourself next time you look in the mirror. And you know what'll happen if you keep doing it? Your brain will correct that message. You just have to keep at it. If you find yourself being a little hypercritical of your spouse, catch yourself in the act and instead say, there is no flaw in you. I went through a really bad illness and a lot of brain damage and spent several years with several really high-level neurologists. There's tons of neurological and scientific evidence out there that if you do literally everything the Bible says you should do, it will completely retrain your brain and change your actions and your feelings. Who knew? Oh, yeah, God. And when, not if, you have those times where you're not sure how to approach a sensitive subject with your spouse, talk it out with God first and ask him to show you how your spouse needs to hear it. And the more you seek God and talk to him, he'll give you some really great ideas to try. In today's show notes download, I've got a list of conversation starters. That might be good places to start. But I promise you, there is no advice you can get, even from a licensed marriage therapist, that is going to come close to the advice God's going to give you. So, for those of you who are hating to be touched by your spouse, and it's not uncommon, but those of you who think, my marriage is not going to last because one of you has a completely different view of sex than the other one, for those who are chasing the always elusive dream of perfect sex in marriage, it all begins with reframing what perfect sex really is. I had tried really hard not to think about sex. I was single. But after marrying the love of my life, I had no idea what a deeply ingrained, very specific image I had in my head of what good sex was and what a good marriage was. And if I were to put that on paper and compare it against what God says his plan was for those things, we would not even be on the same page. It's no wonder that every little marriage book I read and every little tip that I took from a magazine really was a Band-Aid at best. When it came down to it, we were two totally different people with two totally different ideas on a lot of things. And in order for us to become one, to become united and intimate in all of those areas, we had to learn to trust each other. We had to learn to replace the fears that we had with a choice to love and to have faith in each other. I wasted years on trying to communicate in ways that did not communicate. Things that I really thought would help turned out just really made things worse. When I read Song of Solomon 7:6-10, it says, "How beautiful and delightful you are, my love, with all your delights. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me." That's, at the core, what I wanted. I wanted to be wanted and needed and desired and sought after by my husband. And he really believed he was doing all those things. What goes wrong in the bedroom is just a reflection of what is misaligned in our intimacy, in our relationship as a married couple. Have you ever seen those old couples that look like they're still madly in love? You know, the ones that when you're single, you say, "Oh, that's what I want." And even when you're married, you're like, "Why can't we have that?" I've been married now for 30 years, and I think I finally figured out the secret to their success. It's not that they've always been so madly in love and everything went perfectly, but everything is close to perfect now because they've chosen to love each other for who they are for that long. My husband has a completely different sense of humor than I do. And when that would show up in the bedroom where I wanted passion, not jokes, I took it personally. I took it to mean that he just wasn't interested in me. And it was a problem for years because all I did was complain about it. And when I did, he thought I didn't love him for who he was. But just like the awe that I still have that God ever bothered to choose me and love me, I want my husband to know that not only did I choose him, but I would choose him again. And I do choose him every day over every other person. I didn't learn this the easy way. I took the long route. It was really through my growth in my relationship with God through reading the Bible that shaped how I started to see my husband differently. That everything, even the odd quirks that were part of him, were built either for my good or for my entertainment. And you know what happened when I started accepting the things about him that weren't in my ideal picture? It broke down a big wall in our intimacy, and not just in the bedroom. And now I'm going to tell you the most powerful thing we ever did to help our marriage and our sex life. We go to a church that teaches the entire Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and every year there's a challenge to read through the Bible on your own. One year we decided that we would get up early and do it together. There wasn't some big, holy, magical thing that happened, but it was like a beautiful, rare plant began to grow. First, the roots, then a little bit of green on top, and then it really flourished. Every day, one of us would have a comment about something we read or a new insight that we hadn't seen before, and we'd laugh and we'd talk. And at the end of it, I got to pray him off to work. And in that prayer to God, right in front of my husband, I would brag on him to God. I would thank God for saving him just for me. And I would talk about any good thing that came to my mind about him. And then I would ask God to bless him for being an incredible husband. I didn't make up any of those things. And a lot of them were just little things. But there is something powerful in hearing somebody who loves you, saying the things they love about you. I think there is no better way to cast out fear, doubt, and suspicion, and all of the other stuff that ruins a marriage, and to be prayed over by your spouse. I'd been doing it for years, just never out loud in front of him. And it was like miracle grow on our marriage. If you have a spouse that's resistant to reading the Bible or praying out loud, still set the discipline of having that conversation with God about your spouse every day. Not complaining, just searching for the reasons God brought them to you and being grateful for the fact that they chose you. And watch the difference God makes in you. And then every day find an opportunity Tell your spouse, I was talking about you to God today. Oh, yeah? What'd you say? And then you get a chance to tell them. Hearing little good things over and over does more to break down suspicion and fear and doubt than anything. I've got some incredible resources for you in today's show notes. You can download them at faithunfiltered.org. And if there's somebody that needs to hear this message, send them a link while you're thinking of it. And why not make today your starting point? Ask your spouse, how can I make you feel chosen again? Tell your spouse, I chose you. I love you, but I want to see how much better we can make this. So how can I make you feel chosen again? And see what happens. If you've enjoyed this, give us a little social love, click all the things, do all the do's. That's the best way you can share it forward. And remember, there are only two things God asks of us. Number one is to love God. We do that by getting to know who He is in His Word. Number two, love people. When you read His Word, you love Him. Our view of others automatically changes. Doing those two things makes us different. And other people want to know why. The Bible calls that being the salt of the earth. And that, my friend, is how we get out there and live our life unfiltered.